Welcome back. Tomorrow, this country marks a milestone. 100 years ago, Agnes Macphail changed Canadian politics forever when the small-town teacher with big ideas became the first woman elected to Parliament. Macphail was not greeted warmly by some of her male colleagues, and in a story women know all too well, her strength was often reclassified as stubbornness. In the years since, some aspects of her thinking and that of her contemporaries have come under deserved scrutiny. Notably, her support of the forced sterilization of people she believed shouldn't procreate, including people with disabilities and many Indigenous women. A century after Macphail's election, the pursuit of full equality and representation remains a challenge, and her historic election continues to inspire. Here's Hannah Thibodeau.
Take a close look at this photo. It's the 14th Parliament, 1921. Now take a closer look. Does anyone stand out?
I was elected in 1921 in spite of the fact that I was a woman.
In the sea of men, Agnes Macphail, Canada's first female member in the House of Commons.
I think it's incredible. 100 years ago, a woman was elected to Parliament.
It would kick off momentous changes in the corridors of power.
She did a lot in Parliament for somebody who was a single voice at that time.
Only 3 weeks in, Macphail stood in Parliament and pitched to change legislation to ensure greater equality.
The sound of a woman's voice had never been heard in the House of Commons coming from the members' benches. And for some people, it just drove them crazy.
But she didn't back down. Women don't want to be deemed to be part of the goods and chattel of men. Women want to be individuals, as men are individuals, Macphail said in that first speech.
To stand there and to affirm that position that she took right off the bat, that she was there to stay. So I'll say thank you.
And all of these women, political trailblazers in their own right. Fast forward to 1993.
Kim Campbell, 1817.
Canada's first and only female prime minister. Kim Campbell says people still felt a shock to their system when she stepped into that role, nearly 75 years later.
They were not ready to revamp or deal with their own visceral reaction against having somebody who looked or sounded like me being prime minister.
Mrs. Sheila Copps.
When the Liberals took power, Sheila Copps was named the first female deputy prime minister. But Copps says her most memorable achievement happened earlier, in 1987.
When I first had my daughter Danelle, she was literally the first child born to a woman in office in the history of Canada. I breastfed her at committee meetings, and I basically generally drove the men crazy.
Paving the way for other political women
Ms. Gould
to help with work-life balance.
Even today, Karina Gould was the first cabinet minister to have a child, but it's still an anomaly, but it's not an impossibility.
For some, there were additional challenges.
When I said yes and I was elected and got to Ottawa, there were no breadcrumbs that were thrown by anyone that I can follow.
In 1993, Jean Augustine became the first Black female MP.
I'm Jean Augustine.
9 years later, she became the first Black woman in cabinet.
So I had to find my own path. I had to stand, as Agnes did, as a strong Black woman, ensuring that African Canadians were respected, that their issues were addressed.
And she championed the adoption of Black History Month in Canada. For Indigenous women, the roadblocks have always been difficult to overcome.
These are not easy doors to be first in, especially, colonial establishments. Indigenous women were not allowed to even vote until 1960. We were not allowed to leave the reserve until 1960.
The Honourable Member for Western Arctic.
I would like to thank my electorate for their support.
It was 1988 when Ethel Blondin Andrew became the first Indigenous woman elected.
I, Ethel Blondin.
It took another 15 years before she also became the first Indigenous woman to sit in cabinet.
I think is a testament and certainly a model for other people to find their place in places that we were never supposed to be.
Places that still can be hostile for some.
I am an Indigenous woman, and that clearly has made me a target of some very serious harassment. But, this is a tough business for anybody.
For these women who have led the way and for those who have come after, there is determination, but a belief there is a long way to go.
I think to get there, you really need to have a thick skin, because the bottom line is you're going into a man's world and not everybody wants you there.
Populism is not good for girls. These are people who often want to go back to gender norms that were very, very repressive to women.
Given winnable opportunities to be in winnable ridings, that we'll see more and more Black females.
We need more diversity in politics. I will continue to push for that, and also to deal with systemic racism, even in this very institution that continues to exclude.
In the last election, 103 women were elected, more than any other time in history. But that's only 30% of all MPs. Still a ways to go from what Agnes Macphail had envisioned.
I don't want women chosen because they're women, but because they're competent persons, because they're human persons with ideas that are of use to the people that live around them or that they are going to represent.
And even 100 years on, the journey to achieve absolute equality continues. Hannah Thibodeau, CBC News, Ottawa.